Question 1 tonight.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Hey, greetings. Glad to have you aboard. Thanks very much for all of that's going on in the world and changing every minute. And you know, if you're a regular listener to the broadcast or viewer to the broadcast, listeners do it on the radio, viewers do it on the television. All right, I'm on television. For the viewers, you know that we record our programs on midday Thursday, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They took the clock away. What happened? That's another conversation. About 1 o'clock on Thursdays. And so you see it on Friday and Sunday on the various stations that you watch, Fox and the CW and Channel 12. The time flies so fast, the news cycles change so quickly, and we've been kind of lamenting that situation, or enjoying it, depending on the case, for months and years now. But with all of the flurry that has been our news, especially the national presidential election at all, locally the bridge at all, that kind of thing, we haven't paid much attention to some questions that are coming up on the ballot that are really, really important. Next week we'll probably spend some time, or the week after, or just before election, talking about some of the financial questions on the ballot. But there's this looming question that the Constitution requires us to ask of ourselves, which is whether we want to change the Constitution. And I've got two real smart guys here to talk to me about their different perspectives about that. So I'm going to just pay attention to that issue alone tonight and see if we can get as much logic in as possible. And these two guys are pretty good on the logic side. So here's the headline that kind of indicates what we're talking about here. And here's a setup well done by Channel 12 to kind of give you a flavor of what you need to decide.
Our next item up for bid: the Rhode Island State Constitution.
Ads like these have been airing in recent weeks, urging Rhode Islanders to reject Question 1. The ballot measure would trigger a constitutional convention where elected delegates could propose changes to the state constitution. Those proposed changes would then be put before voters in an election. Among those against Question 1, Planned Parenthood, the ACLU of Rhode Island, and multiple local unions. Patrick Crowley is the president of Rhode Island AFL-CIO. Appearing on Newsmakers last month, he said he worries special interest groups could dominate a constitutional convention.
The ability to influence that in a low turnout election could mean that it wouldn't be reflective of everyday Rhode Islanders.
Take away minority rights. All it takes is cold hard cash.
I doubt very much that would happen, but there are issues such as the right to an education that could be addressed.
Timothy Duffy with the Rhode Island Association of School Committees has been advocating for years for Rhode Island to follow Massachusetts and add a right to education to the state constitution. He says a 2023 URI poll shows the majority of Rhode Islanders strongly support the idea, but legislative leaders have blocked it. Duffy says a right to education would allow students to use the courts if they wanted to put an end to a teacher strike or increase education spending.
We depend on property taxes to fund education at an alarming rate. So this would essentially say that the state has to invest more.
All right, that's one of the issues, and Tim he's been on that for quite some time. The state senator Sam Zurier, a veteran of the legislature, is here, along with Steven Brown from the ACLU. Both are not strangers to the broadcast and/or to conversations like this, and I welcome you both for participating. Just to clarify, yes on one, no on one. All right,
correct.
You got that? Yes on one, no on one. Before we get to the yeses and nos and sling out your executive summaries and then digging in a little bit, would you agree with me it's kind of under the radar?
Yes, definitely.
Right? Crazy, isn't it?
Well, there is lots going on.
Yeah.
Both at the state and particularly at the national level in terms of elections. So it's not necessarily surprising, but it is concerning.
In your East Side district, are people chatting about this?
Well, I've been sending letters to my constituents to discuss the issue, and a number of my constituents have been interested in the issue, and we've been trading ideas.
Is it your engagement or theirs, though?
Oh, I began the engagement,
Yeah.
and it goes back, actually, the General Assembly was supposed to assemble a study commission to look at it, and I started urging my colleagues to get working on that at the beginning of the session, and it didn't come out until April. And I wish we had done more work in the General Assembly.
Objectively, what was the byproduct of that work?
It was a report from a preparatory commission which identified some of the issues that could be decided on a constitutional convention, and it also had a report about the cost that a convention might.
Well, remind me, because it slipped by me. Did it weigh in on whether we ought to continue asking the question as to whether we should convene? No,
No.
It didn't do that.
No.
So what was the output? What was the net result?
Well, it was a 7 to 8 page report. It talked a little bit about what a constitutional convention was. It talked a little bit about what proponents could see coming out of the convention.
Was it a punt? Did it punt?
Well, I was asking them to include a much more thorough report to get into the issues in more depth.
So another one of those General Assembly exercises that maybe have gotten a little bit of work done, but not much. I get that. So in terms of awareness, are you part of a coalition that's spending money formally on this? Is
Yes.
that 120 grand I saw was a number floated around the press about a budget that was being spent on the No on 2. Is the ACLU involved in that gang?
Not on No on 2, no.
I mean, No on 1.
Yeah. We haven't reached that amount yet. It would be nice if we did, but there is a formal coalition, and as the report noted earlier, there's some advertising going on, but we need a lot more money to really get the message out.
Is there a formal entity that's Yes on 1?
I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, it's always kind of been weird in my history here, being here a couple of decades plus now, that the question gets posed and the people who don't want the question to get posed kind of congregate, form a strategy, and argue against it. And the yes folks are kind of like...
Well, for what it's worth, I believe 10 years ago there was more of an organized effort. I think that Gary Sass, Judge Flanders were involved in that at that time. I think they had some support from the Hassenfeld Institute. But
Gary Sass, formerly the Rhode Island Expenditure Council, now at Bryant, doing some good work up there, studying the issues of the day.
Correct.
Yeah, revenue director. He's been here many, many times. All right, very good. That's kind of a setup. We'll come back and we'll get into the issue here in a more meaty way. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
A constitutional convention is dramatically overdue, and the reason for that is because we have some basic problems with how Rhode Island government functions that the powers that be don't want to change.
That's Ken Black, watchdog, and a lot of people in the media go to him for opinions. I do as well on occasion. The other background that we should set here is that the Constitution calls for the question about the Constitutional Convention, and has been in the Constitution for how long now?
I think it came in 1986.
Well, we had a convention in 1986.
Yeah, and as part of that.
Oh, okay, so we had a convention in '86. Yes.
The convention, the question that needs to appear on the ballot every 10 years is from the 1970s.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And the first one that we had was in '86.
Correct.
And the only one we've had since.
Yes.
Yes. And the purpose of such is to, what? Just kind of rework the way we do business.
I would call it a safety valve. The other way that we can amend our Constitution is if the General Assembly approves a specific question for the voters to consider. And they have done that from time to time, and I can get into more details later. But when an important issue comes up, and I thought Tim Duffy did a great job on a right to education, sometimes it just can't get through the General Assembly, and a constitutional convention can be a safety valve to allow the voters an opportunity to weigh in on issues that we in the General Assembly have not been able to give them to consider.
I've got a point counterpoint for that, but I'm not the one debating this matter. But I'm going to come back to that because I think there's a sticky wicket and kind of a catch-22 in what you're suggesting. That's your basic, Sam, though. That's your basic premise for wanting this question approved, correct?
Yeah, I mean,
is there anything else in the executive summary for you?
The larger frame is I have some ideas of potential benefits. There are risks and concerns that are worthy of consideration. I'm sure we'll hear about those from Steve. And in my opinion, the benefits outweigh the risks.
Okay. All right. That's your short answer. And you don't want it because?
For a lot of reasons. We think they're both procedural and substantive concerns that people should have about calling a convention. Procedurally, you hear people talk about this is a way for the people to get involved, get away from the General Assembly. But we know from our history, from what happened in the 1986 convention, it's as political as the General Assembly. You have a very small number of people voting. It's a special election. Some people were elected to the convention in 1986 with about 5% of the eligible voters in their district voting for them. That's not quite the representative democracy you're thinking of. Politics. Let me.
I want you to finish your thoughts, but I want to be intricate about this because I think people get confused. You have to choose members to the convention.
Right. So the way it works is there's a special election held for people to elect delegates. The delegates are elected by House district.
In an off-election year?
In an off-election year.
In November, though?
Well, it would be up to the General Assembly to set the date.
They could set it at any time?
Yes.
Okay.
But you're going to see it either a special election in 1985 or a special time in 2025 or 2026. And it's
we
a
do
special
election can be bulleted. I mean, what I mean by bulleted is that you get small turnouts of very focused people.
Exactly. And that's what happened in the 80s. There was a total of 18% turnout of voters. And then in the districts themselves, you often had 5, 6, 7, 8 people running. There was only a fifth or a quarter of the delegates got elected by majority vote because there were so many people running in each district.
All right, so
there's that whole political
thing. So it's
thing.
problematic to build the team of the conventioneers.
Yes, and for a second reason that I think is important too, and that's the politics. The legislators in 1984 promised that they would not run for delegates themselves, which they had the right to do. And they did not. They fulfilled that pledge. What you instead saw were 7 former legislators get elected, 4 immediate relatives of legislators get elected, including the son and sister of the Speaker of the House.
So
the most amazing statistic is 17 of the delegates who had not been office holders before used the convention as a stepping stone to run for the General Assembly that very same year. So this idea that it'll be politics won't have anything to do with it, nothing has changed.
So
what
he's saying is you don't find these imaginary altruistic citizens who want to volunteer their time to rethink the way we do business in Rhode Island with no favor or no,
If our requirement was to reenact the Constitutional Congress of 1785 or 1787, we won't hit that mark. I am more interested in what comes out of the convention than what goes in. It's a democratic process. It's kind of messy. But if you look at what came out in 1986, there were 14 proposals that went to the voters. The voters approved 8 of them, and 3 of them I think are particularly valuable, namely an ethics commission, shoreline access, and a crime victims bill of rights. We might never have had those were it not for a constitutional convention. And beginning with what Tim Duffy said, I think there's another list of important legislation that the voters could decide, and I think the voters showed some wisdom. For instance, they voted down the anti-abortion amendment is so important civil right to so many of us. Let the voters to decide, and how it's developed inside the Constitutional Convention. I don't have.
So would you agree? How would we have gotten? You're not unfamiliar with the Ethics Commission and the work that goes on.
So let me talk about his good things that came out of the convention. Let's talk about some of the other things that came out of the convention. Sure. In terms of the good things, the Ethics Commission, maybe it was a good thing, but keep in mind it was the General Assembly that passed the amendment making legislators themselves subject to the Ethics Commission. The way it was worded, as it was passed in 1986, the courts held it did not apply to legislators. So it took the General Assembly. The General Assembly were the ones that actually made themselves accountable to the Commission. In terms of the Victim Rights Amendment, I'm sure the Senator knows there's a Rhode Island Supreme Court decision that essentially says it's unenforceable. If your rights are violated under that, you can't go into court and vindicate them. So it's a symbolic thing. It really didn't do anything. So now let's talk about some of the other things that they passed that Senator Zurier doesn't talk about. He mentioned the abortion amendment. What most people don't know is that the Constitutional Convention passed 2 anti-abortion amendments. One of them was defeated handily. Another one remains in our Constitution to this day.
Which is?
It says that the state constitution does not provide protection for abortion rights. So you can't use the state constitution to argue, I have a state constitutional right.
Yeah, we are pretty
regard.
heavy anti-abortion legislated right now comparative to other states in the country, correct?
Well, so this is prime opportunity for those who want to try to roll back what the legislature has done. The only way to do it now would be through a constitutional convention.
If I may, there's some fine distinctions here. I agree with Steve that there was language in the 1986 amendments that said there is no right to abortion in our Constitution at the same time that they said there are a number of other civil rights. But what that amounted to is saying that you can't do it through the courts. What happened instead was the General Assembly passed the Reproductive Freedom Act in 1921, and that was permitted by our Constitution, and it is the law of the land today in Rhode Island.
You mean 2021?
In 2021.
21, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Boy,
I don't think they thought about those stuff back then.
But anyway, these are fine distinctions. But I don't agree that the voters banned reproductive freedom with that amendment. They just said the courts can't do it, and we did it in the legislature.
That's right, and it's still it's there. It's a ticking time bomb, and it should be of concern. But there were other ones too. The Constitutional Convention and the voters approved an amendment that took away voting rights from thousands of individuals because of a criminal record. And it was the General Assembly 20 years later that undid that damage that the convention caused.
Okay, when we come back, I want to make sure that everyone understands exactly how this thing is layered. Stay with us. All right, so I want to make sure that everybody understands the process here and the layers that are involved. The State Senator was chatting with Steve during the break about something you want to respond to. Very quickly, please do that.
Yeah, so Steve noted that the 86 convention passed an amendment that said that convicted felons were not allowed to vote until 3 years after they completed their term and their parole. And he is correct to say, or I agree with him, he says that the General Assembly put a revision on the ballot that said that their voting rights begin after their incarceration ends. And that was the right thing for them to do. With that said, I want to put that on the scale against, for example, a right to education, which would affect tens of thousands of children in Rhode Island every year. Yeah, and that's why I say the balance.
The right to education is his own sticky wick. Everyone goes, right to education? Sure. Which I think is actually reflective of how people respond to a poll that says, do you want a constitutional convention? People go, sure. Yeah. But they really don't understand what the meat of it is. So let me just make sure before, I've got to make sure that we get this through because we can discuss each little elemental thing that's come out of convention and we can be here until midnight. And I'd love to be, but I got to get this done. Let's make it clear, because you were helpful, Steve, here. You have to vote for the players. Right. The people who are actually in the convention, which is a maximum of...
It will be 75 delegates.
75 delegates, all right? Then they do their business.
Yep.
They set the schedule and they make the arguments and they put a whole bunch of stuff up and they deliberate and they come out with a work product that could be as many as 14, 15 questions. It could be as one, it could be 100.
Yeah.
But no matter what they decide, and obviously they put a question up because they want something done. It's an advocacy type of act, right? Mm-hmm. But then the general public has to vote on what they have put out there. So the state senator would say, there's the protection. Correct?
I agree.
I made your argument. And your argument is?
Argument is individual rights, minority rights should not be subject to that sort of majoritarian decision making. And we saw in '86 some of the problems with that. They did vote one bad amendment down. That from a civil rights perspective, they approved 3 really bad constitutional amendments. And while the thing is, we support the constitutional right to an education, but we don't think you use the hammer of a constitutional convention in order to get it passed. There's no guarantee that that is what's going to happen. Your education thing is right to an education. We've seen people on the right, organizations on the right, they want to do education amendments too, but it's things like school choice, tuition tax credits. Those are not.
So here's the thing that I've always had a bug about Rhode Island versus Massachusetts, where Massachusetts brought us initiative petition. It's what got Prop 2.5, and you may like that measure or not, but there's a petition capability amongst the citizens in Massachusetts that Rhode Island does not have. And so what I find would be the catch-22 is, I would rather see initiative petition in Rhode Island versus the Constitutional Convention. But it seems to me that the Constitutional Convention would be the mechanism to actually call for whether or not we could do initiative petition.
Well, can I give you a historical?
Do you agree with me on that? I mean, I guess the General Assembly could post a law that says we now want initiative petition, but it seems like the Constitutional Convention would be more fertile for that.
Well, you would have thought that about legislators being subject to the Ethics Commission too. But it can happen either way. Historically, it's worth noting the 1986 convention did actually propose to the voters an initiative and referendum amendment.
Okay.
And it was voted down because people thought it ended up being so watered down, it was better to have nothing. And that was the political process of the convention at work.
Okay.
Yeah. To be fair to the ACLU, a difference between a voter initiative on the one hand and a constitutional amendment on the other is that most voter initiative laws could be canceled by subsequent legislation enacted by the General Assembly.
And such is the case in Beacon Hill. That they have a review capability, but it's political wildfire to turn down the I don't know, the elemental motive of a referendum. In a constitutional amendment, the stakes are higher. But as Steve noted, with regard to felon voting rights, we have from time to time realized that one of the amendments that we approved didn't work out, and we can go back and reverse it. All right, so come on the radio with me, guys. In the next week or so, I would appreciate it for a longer conversation, because as I told you before we started, it would be very frustrating. We've got most of the elements out, but to get a yes on one disposition, I mean, where do people come see more of your arguments? Is there a website or the like? You need a quick answer on that.
Yeah, my website.
Go look for it, Google it, and the ACLU is put something out.
Yeah.
Right. All right, you're good, man. Thank you very much for coming in to talk about that. I knew this would be hard. Final word when we come back. Stay with us. Study this one. The angel or devil is in the details.